This is Land of Havilah, Isaiah 51. This chapter is an encouraging message to all who follow after righteousness. Yahweh says, verse 1, "Listen to me, you who follow after righteousness, you who seek Yahweh. Look to the rock you were cut from, and to the quarry you were dug from. Look to Abraham your father, and to Sarah who bore you. For when he was but one, I called him, and I blessed him, and made him many." Comment in verse 1, Yahweh says to the righteous, "Look to the rock you were cut from, and quarry you were dug from." So assuming we're the righteous he's speaking to, what rock were we cut from, and what quarry were we dug from? We wouldn't know the answer without verse 2, which says the rock and quarry we came from are Abraham and Sarah. We're chips off the old block, he's saying. The old block is Abraham, or it's Sarah, if you like. We're offspring of Abraham and Sarah because of our faith. Quote, "Those who are of faith, the same are the children of Abraham," Galatians 3:7. The message of verses 1 and 2 is to look to Sarah and Abraham and follow their example. Consider the trials they endured, the faith they displayed, and be inspired. Of course, to do that, we'll need to read Genesis. Since God told us to look to Abraham and Sarah, he expects us to read Genesis. And not to stop there, because according to Hebrews 12:1, we should be familiar with the entire cloud of witnesses, which is the collection of all the Old Testament heroes, their examples. When we read about them and consider their faith, it bolsters our own faith. They witness to us by the way they lived their lives. If we're not familiar with them, we're almost orphans, not knowing where we came from and being without the foundation of a family, having never been taught by our spiritual fathers and mothers how we should act. So let's get familiar with them. Look to them is the way Yahweh put it in verse 2. God called Abraham and blessed him in verse 2. The point being he's also called and blessed us. How has he blessed us? Verse 3. "For Yahweh has comforted Zion. He has comforted all her waste places and has made her wilderness like Eden and her desert like the garden of Yahweh. Joy and gladness will be found therein, thanksgiving in the voice of melody. Listen to me, my people, and hear me, my nation, for a law will go out from me, and I'll establish my justice for a light to the peoples. My righteousness is near, my salvation has gone out, and my arms will judge the peoples. The islands will wait for me, and they'll trust my arm. Lift up your eyes to the heavens and look on the earth beneath, for the heavens will vanish away like smoke, and the earth will wear out like a garment, and its inhabitants will die in the same way. But my salvation will be forever, and my righteousness will not be abolished." Comment verse 3 mentions Zion again. Isaiah used that word 47 times. Zion is several things. Sometimes it means all the promised land, or sometimes just Jerusalem, whether it's the present earthly version of Jerusalem or the New Jerusalem of the future. But most of the time when Isaiah uses it, it's a reference to the people of it. Everyone who belongs to the family of God, past, present, and future, are collectively Zion. So it's a place, and more so it's the people who belong there, or the people who will eventually be gathered there. Zion is you and me if we're in the family. In verse 3, Yahweh has comforted all Zion's waste places and made her a wilderness like Eden. The Holy Land has some very dry, rugged, barren waste places, and people are sometimes that way too. But Yahweh comforts us by making the wilderness like Eden in verse 3. And we know how God has turned many of us around and made our waste into a garden. He'll do the same to his land. It'll be like a garden and not any type of barren waste. More about that in a minute. Joy and gladness will be found there in verse 3, thanksgiving in the voice of melody. It'll be a place where people are happy and singing. In verse 4, listen to me, my people. A law will go out from me, and I'll establish my justice for a light to the peoples. Yahweh, the Lord Jesus Christ, will be there personally and instruct the world in righteousness, as he already does in the hearts of those who know him. There will no longer be any confusion about what to do or how to decide controversial issues. We'll have every answer, as God already provides wisdom to everyone who asks, James 1:5. In verse 5, Yahweh says, my arms will judge the peoples. He's still speaking of that future time. Yahweh's arm or hand is the action he takes on the earth. It's his intervention on the earth. His arm is what he decides to do, and it's the doing of it. So when he says, my arms will judge the peoples, he'll make particular judgments, and he'll enforce those judgments. He'll be both the law and the enforcement of the law. He'll straighten this place out thoroughly. As he said in verses 4 and 5, a law will go out from me, and I'll establish my justice for a light to the peoples. My arms will judge the peoples. End quote. Then, islands will wait for me, also translated the coastlands will wait for me, which means all the world will look to him for his judgments, both the declaration of what's right and the enforcement of it. So it'll be a world where God reigns, even the farthest reaches. That's what we're headed for. Then in verse 6, to confirm, he's talking about end times. The heavens will vanish away like smoke. The earth will wear out like a garment. Its inhabitants will die the same way. But my salvation will be forever, and my righteousness will not be abolished. In other words, he'll destroy the present heavens and earth along with its inhabitants, as confirmed in 2 Peter chapter 3. But there will be salvation for some, and he'll establish a new heaven and earth where righteousness dwells, 2 Peter 3:13. These are some of the things the offspring of Abraham and Sarah should keep in mind. We should encourage ourselves accordingly, Yahweh is saying, keeping in mind where we're headed. Now, getting back to the present day, verse 7. Listen to me, you who know righteousness, the people in whose heart is my law. Don't fear the reproach of men, and don't be dismayed at their insults. For the moth will eat them up like a garment, and the worm will eat them like wool. But my righteousness will be forever, and my salvation to all generations. Comment in verses 7 and 8, since God will destroy the earth and the inhabitants of it, but preserve the righteous, so we shouldn't fear the reproach of men. We should think of our glorious destiny as opposed to what their destiny will be, and not be afraid of them when they abuse us. Quote, don't fear the reproach of men, and don't be dismayed at their insults. Verse 9. Awake, awake, put on strength, arm of Yahweh. Awake as in the days of old, the generations of ancient times. Isn't it you who cut Rahab in pieces, who pierced the monster? Isn't it you who dried up the sea, the waters of the great deep, who made the depths of the sea a way for the redeemed to pass over? Comment in verse 9, the arm of Yahweh is what Yahweh does. He acts on his own. He acted through Jesus. He acts through us. All of it is Yahweh's arm by whichever vessel he might choose. So in verse 9, awake, arm of Yahweh, means do your thing, God. That's a cheer for God to arise and go forth in the earth. As you did marvelous things in times past, keep doing it. In verse 10, Yahweh made the depths of the sea a way for the redeemed to pass, which is to say he parted the water for Israel to pass through the Red Sea. But the way Isaiah put it, it's in general that God parts the sea for all his people to pass through. No matter how difficult and impossible a situation might seem, maybe a person seems beyond human hope, he's so far gone, we shouldn't even think of that. No one is too far gone. God can make a way for anyone through the most impossible situation, like making a path through the sea. Quoting again, he made the depths of the sea a way for the redeemed to pass over. End quote. Speaking of the redeemed, verse 11, those ransomed by Yahweh will return and come with singing to Zion, and everlasting joy shall be on their heads. They'll obtain gladness and joy. Sorrow and sighing shall flee away. Comment, Revelation 21 supplements verse 11 that we just read, that the present heaven and earth will pass away. God will replace them with a new heaven and earth. The new Jerusalem will descend from heaven, presumably onto the new earth. God will dwell with his people there, wipe every tear from their eyes. Death will be no more, neither will there be mourning, nor crying, nor pain. It'll be an Eden, going back to verse 3, with no waste places, with joy, thanksgiving, and the voice of melody. Verse 12. I, even I, am he who comforts you. Who are you that you're afraid of man who shall die, and the Son of Man who will be made as grass. Comment, the point of grass in chapter 40, verse 7 was that it doesn't last long. It's green, then withers in no time. All flesh is as grass, so don't fear man in verse 12. Verse 13. Have you forgotten Yahweh your Maker who stretched out the heavens and laid the foundations of the earth? Do you live in fear continually all day because of the fury of the oppressor when he prepares to destroy? Where is the fury of the oppressor? Comment, what can man do to me? Hebrews 13:6. According to Jewish tradition, Isaiah was eventually sawn in half. It's probably true since Hebrews 11:37 says one of the Old Testament heroes was sawn apart. So Isaiah lived out what he taught about not fearing man, as evidenced by the way he died. Verse 14. The captive exile will speedily be freed, and he'll not die and go down into the pit, and his bread will not fail. Comment, a captive exile would be someone like David, who for a brief time was exiled from Israel and a captive of the Philistines, but God freed him and restored him to glory. The point is that there's no situation from which God won't redeem us. Things look tough, don't worry about it. We know how it'll come out in the end. You'll not die or go down into the pit. Your bread won't fail. God will keep feeding you through every situation. He'll keep giving you the encouragement and support you need in the toughest situations. Verse 15. For I am Yahweh your God, who stirs up the sea so that its waves roar. Yahweh of armies is his name. I've put my words in your mouth and have covered you in the shadow of my hand, that I may plant the heavens and lay the foundations of the earth, and tell Zion, you are my people. Comment in verse 16, Yahweh covers us with the shadow of his hands, that he may plant the heavens and lay the foundations of the earth. And in other words, during this interim period where he's destroying the old heavens and earth and creating the new heavens and earth, he'll cover us with his hand. He'll keep us from any destruction while he creates this new heavens and earth, because he says to us, we're his people. He'll place us on that new heavens and earth. In verse 16, speaking about that place, he'll plant the new heavens, lay the foundations of the new earth, and tell us we're his people. So there's no need to fret about the present. Isaiah had a long career through good times and bad times, through 4 kings, some of them evil like Ahaz, who dragged the land into near ruin, and probably speaking of the misery of the land during Ahaz's reign, verse 17. Awake, awake, stand up, Jerusalem, you who've drunk from Yahweh's hand the cup of his wrath. You've drunken the bowl of the cup of staggering and drained it. There's no one to guide her among all the sons to whom she's given birth, and there's no one who takes her by the hand among all the sons who she's brought up. These 2 things have happened to you. Who'll grieve with you? Desolation and destruction, and famine and the sword. How can I comfort you? Your sons have fainted. They lie at the head of all the streets like an antelope in the net. They're full of Yahweh's wrath, the rebuke of your God. Therefore now hear this, you afflicted and drunken, but not with wine. Thus says your Lord Yahweh, your God who pleads the cause of his people. Behold, I've taken out of your hand the cup of staggering, even the bowl of the cup of my wrath. You'll not drink it any more, and I'll put it into the hand of those who afflict you, who've said to your soul, bow down that we may walk over you. And you've laid your back as the ground, like a street to those who walk over. Comment in verses 17 to 23, the people of Jerusalem ignored Yahweh. There was no one to guide her among all her sons, no man to stand up to preach Yahweh and straighten things out. There was desolation and destruction because Yahweh's hand was against them. But in verse 22, Yahweh has determined to take the cup of staggering out of their hand, which means he would give them relief. There was the relief that came from the righteous Hezekiah, who was the very next king after Ahaz. But specifically about this chapter, there's the greater